Well, good afternoon. Thanks very much for sticking around. I have the unenviable task of being between the last speaker between here and the social hour. That's not very good. It's usually, that or lunch, So I just have a few comments. I want to thank Doug Steele for giving my talk. But I do want to make a disclaimer. I inadvertently married my wife, and then found out that she was the great-great-great-granddaughter of the sister of President James Buchanan, who was arguably the worst president in the United States. One example of that was that he viewed that the first Morrill Act was unconstitutional. There's never been a challenge, so I suspect that he was not a constitutional lawyer. There were some comments about whether or not, I think Dr. Steele made the comment, whether or not President Lincoln and Senator Morrill thought that this would be something that would be very good. Some of the detractors of the Morrill Act actually suggested that President Lincoln never really thought that this was a major accomplishment. And they indicated that they thought that it was not a major accomplishment because he never mentioned it in any of his major speeches. And you think about that. Well, if he was really supportive of this, he would have thought that this was something that would be very, very important to talk to the populace about the new kinds of universities that are being developed. But I think the president had a lot of important things on his mind, notably trying to save the republic, trying to abolish slavery, trying to figure out a way to rebuild the nation after a war, and oh, by the way, trying to find a general that could actually win the war. So he had a lot of things on his mind, and he wasn't necessarily thinking about identifying certain things like this. But the important thing, I think, is that even though some people have identified that the land-grant concept was not new, the use of the land-grant concept to establish a new kind of university was revolutionary in its thought. And I think that's what was very important. It was a new kind of a university devoted to serve society through science and education. And you think about this. Science was driving the whole thought of the Morrill Act, using the scientific revolution that was being developed and implemented during that period of time, all of the new knowledge base that was developing, and using science as the promoter of new technologies. President Cresciato made a comment about the importance of what happened after the Morrill Act, and the fact that agricultural productivity increased, that the Industrial Revolution was moving forward. But a 2000, and just to verify that, a 2004 NSF report indicated that in 1862, in the entire United States, there were only 6 engineering colleges in the entire United States, only 6. By 1880, there were 85, and in 1917, 126. So again, President Cresciato made that comment that they actually had to import engineers to build roads and construct bridges. Obviously, one of the components of the Morrill Act was not just agriculture; it was engineering as well. Dr. Ramaswamy made a comment that we've got this tripartite mission: teaching, research, and extension. That's what sets the land-grant institutions apart from every other institution of higher education in the United States. Teaching, research, and extension. These all coalesce in the College of Agriculture and in land-grant institutions to serve the citizens of the state and the region. And this is the difference between the land-grant university and non-land-grant university, the tradition of serving. We have service to society, which is critical, and that's a revolutionary concept from the mission of a university. Harvard University could care less if the farmers in North Dakota or Montana or anywhere else in the upper Great Plains had a crop or didn't have a crop because of the 15B rust epidemic that occurred in the 50s. We care about that. We want to provide service. I should also mention, Dr. Steele, tell that farmer to grow a North Dakota variety because ours are resistant to rust. So you don't have a problem then. So the land-grant idea of service requires a commitment to first-class science and excellent scholarship. And it also apply that science and scholarship to practical problems in society. And I think that's one of the key components that we have. Again, at North Dakota State University, and I'll talk about the North Dakota, or at least my impression of the North Dakota experience in a few minutes, but we want to solve practical problems to make sure that society moves forward. The North Dakota experience, Secretary Schaefer said it very well. We're blessed. We're blessed with productive soils. We're blessed with enterprising, intelligent, and energetic people. We're blessed with tremendous natural resources, not only the soils, but the fossil fuels, wind, bioproducts, and everything else. And we have the opportunity to follow, in the case of North Dakota State University, we have had the opportunity to follow some great administrators. Those administrators provided the foundation for all of our recent successes that we've had. And we've had some really good successes. Those of you that are affiliated with NDSU know that over the last 10 years in the Extension Service, their budgets have increased under Dwayne Houck's leadership. Their general fund budgets have increased over 69%. In the Experiment Station, again, that 10-year period, those budgets have increased about 75%. So our budgets have increased dramatically, and it's because of the foundation of that was created by the previous administrators, such as Roald Lund, such as Don Anderson. We've had great success over the years, and the reasons why we've had that is because we have indicated two things. One, we're accountable, and one, we have integrity. When we say we're going to do something, we do it, and we're accountable and show that we have that accountability. Some of the accomplishments of service can be pretty historic as well. Arlen made a comment about the rust epidemics in the 1950s, and Dr. Glenn Smith was our wheat breeder at the time, and he worked on a collaborative effort. He worked with the University of Minnesota pathologists to isolate race 15B, to find the appropriate resistance genes, and then to incorporate those resistance genes into the hard red spring wheat germplasm, which literally stopped the rust epidemics in this region of the United States. It was a tremendous accomplishment. It didn't save $5 million or $10 million or $50 million. It saved hundreds of millions of dollars. When we release a hard red spring wheat variety today, typically we're generating $300 million of new money into the state of North Dakota. That's a tremendous accomplishment from our wheat breeding program. We have similar but less stellar examples in terms of impact, but everything that we do has an impact. When we built our new beef research facility here on campus, if we could increase our efficiency in rations by only 10%, we could generate $40 million a year in new revenue. 10%, that's not very much. And we've got some great animal scientists that will allow us to do that. In the 1990s, we started experiencing a problem that we've never had before. It was fusarium head blight, and it was being very problematic. It actually cost the state of North Dakota over $7 billion in lost revenue because of the disease and the impact of the disease. But Dr. Richard Froberg, who was Dr. Smith's successor, and Dr. Bob Stack in plant pathology, identified and incorporated resistance to this particular disease from a Chinese wheat called Sumai 3. What was interesting was that they started that process 5 years before we even saw the disease in the state of North Dakota. So they weren't clairvoyant. They just said, we think that this is going to be a problem. We're seeing an increase in corn acreage. This is going to be problematic. It's problematic in other states. We better start looking for some resistance. They did. They incorporated it. And when Alson hard red spring wheat was released in 2000, it was identified by the North Dakota Wheat Commission as a wheat variety that literally saved the wheat industry in the state of North Dakota. When we released Glen hard red spring wheat a few years later, which had slightly better quality, it generated, in its first year of release, generated $350 million new dollars to the state. $350 million new dollars. It became the #1 variety in a very, very short period of time. I believe it was about 2 years. It's still the #1 variety. It was released in 2006. We'd never see this level of support of a new variety or of a variety over that length of time. So we've had a number of successes, and I think one of the key things about these successes, and I'm just going to be very brief here because the time is running very short, but I do want to make one comment about an individual who some people think is probably our best scientist that ever existed here at NDSU, and that's H.L. Bali. And I'll just very, very briefly mention his accomplishments. Bali was the first to develop a successful, quick, and efficient laboratory test to detect cholera in water samples. This was credited with stemming the cholera epidemic at the U.S. at the time. It was widely adopted across the United States. Professor Bali was here in the late 1800s and into the early 1900s. He was the first to make the association that barberry served as the alternate host for the wheat stem rust pathogen, and that resulted in a state law in 1916 to eradicate the barberry from North Dakota. 2 years before, there was a federal law to eradicate barberry. Another example that he had was that he was instrumental in developing the pure seed law for North Dakota. And North Dakota was one of the first states to enact such a law. He also was asked to help write the federal Pure Seed Act, which is essentially verbatim to the North Dakota Pure Seed Law. And then finally, he was among the first, if not the first, plant pathologist to prove that plant diseases can be soil-borne. From this work, he formulated crop rotation recommendations to preserve soil health, and that's preserving one of our most precious resources. Unfortunately, some people took umbrage at that, and they got him fired from the institution because of that activity. But having said all of that, one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this is that we have a responsibility as an institution to continue to move forward in terms of science. In my opinion, science is driving society, and we have to continue to move forward in dealing with science. But as a land-grant institution with respect to North Dakota State University, we have to also have an obligation to serve our stakeholders throughout the state. John Hanna, who was the president of Michigan State University from 1941 to 1969, always started a faculty meeting by saying, on an annual basis, by saying our first obligation is to the sons and daughters of the taxpayers of Michigan, and these are our students. And I think we can paraphrase that by saying our first obligation is to the citizens of the state in which we reside, and these are the individuals that will continue to provide support for us. If we don't serve our state well, the resources won't be available for us to expand much beyond the state borders. So even though we want to help individuals, we're just not going to have that capability because our state support is going to dwindle. And in North Dakota, from my experience, as I indicated, legislators demand integrity and accountability, and we must show that we have the former and that we can provide the latter. With the state support that we have been able to receive, and again, I want to comment on Dwayne's stellar performance as the Extension Director. Our research will create new knowledge and technology to solve the problems in the state, and our Extension Service will continue to provide information to enhance the quality of life for all North Dakotans. One of the final comments I want to just make is that I believe Dr. Lund, when he was the Dean and Director for the celebration, the 100-year celebration of the Hatch Act, asked a group of faculty to come together and come up with a phrase that could just identify everything that we do in agriculture. And the phrase that was developed is "for the land and its people," and I think that says it all. We're here not only to serve the people of the state of North Dakota, we're here to provide sustainability for the natural resources that exist. We've got great people, we've got great resources, we want to continue to move forward. I just want to make one final comment before we get into the question period, and that is, with all due respect to Dr. Ramaswamy, North Dakota is not contemplating its navel. We're moving forward, we're dealing with 21st century research in 21st century facilities. So with that, thanks very much for your time.